Hi, this is Nicholas, and this is my project, an analysis on significant strikes. I currently am a senior student at Valencia in the Computing Technology and Software Development program pursuing software development. The title of my project is Analysis on Significant Strikes in the UFC, and the languages and tools that I used during this program or this project primarily were Visual Studio Code, Postman, and Power BI. Visual Studio Code is an integrated development environment or IDE that allows users to open different files like a JSON file or write code in different programming languages. Um, Postman is an application that allows the user to run get, put, post, and delete operations to interact with APIs. Power BI is an analytical platform that allows users to import data from various sources and display them in visual form, such as charts. Over the course of my project, the implementation changed from using Python or utilizing a Python-heavy development environment and attempting to get AWS to automate my pull requests through the API. But the infrequency of UFC events Due to the infrequency of UFC events I was analyzing, it allowed me to pull and store them locally rather than rely on automated pulling. So the scale decreased heavily during this time, allowing it to be a much more lightweight project. Thanks to Postman, I was able to create pull requests very easily and get a formatted JSON to import in little to no time. Now, my findings for this project is that a large majority of the UFC fighters favor strikes to the head. This can be seen in the Power BI dashboard over the 2 weeks of all of the fights of all the significant strikes are aimed at the head. Some other weight classes, such as bantamweight and women's flyweight, threw more leg kicks. I believe this is primarily due to fighters looking for finishes and or to get a bonus or fight of the night. Below now we can see this is my week 1 data, and this was pulled from the UFC 250 event. And like I said, during this event, lightweight and I mean, really all the weight classes, majority had um, head landed, like strikes to the head as their focus. You can see middleweight. I believe these fights just ended early with a knockout, and that's why there's not that many significant strikes here. And if we look at week 2, you can see that there is a much larger spread of the data, but the overwhelming majority of them do still favor the head. Now, when I was doing this project, I did run into some technical challenges. The main challenges that I did face were attempting to set up Python scripts to pull this data. I wasn't too familiar with API calling and the libraries that I needed to use for them and how to get that set up in AWS that in a way that would fit in the time frame and the free credits that are allotted. So I addressed this by switching to Postman to easily allow me to pull from the UFC API. And secondly, I decided to move away from AWS and to store the files locally on my computer and import them into Power BI to visualize the data. Some successes and disappointments. The first success that I had with this project was importing the data from my JSON file into Power BI and setting up the dashboard. The second success that I had was appending the Power BI queries into one dashboard to show the data gathered from two UFC fights in an appealing chart. The main disappointment that I'd say I ran into was encountering like the complexity of AWS, and I think that AWS is a good service, but I just didn't have enough time to myself to learn and get it to work in the way I wanted it to. The last disappointment was the complexity of the JSON file, I would say, and how it integrated with Power BI when it was imported. I had to quickly learn how to get Power BI to work and to extract the data out of the tables and rows that it created. Um, if I could do this project over, I would have focused more on AWS, and I probably would have relied on AWS to pull the data for me and then utilize AWS QuickSight. That's another visualization platform that I could have used for my data. I also think that I could have focused on learning more of the libraries to call from the API with Python and to make better use of that language. And lastly, if I could do it over, I would focus on the round by round rather than the overall strikes, because I feel that it would have had a, it would have been able, I would have been able to see if there was a difference in like fighter freshness, if that influenced where they were hitting, or if they were taking a lot of damage, if that was influencing anything also. And now a little run through of how this project worked for me. So I would pull, this is Postman. We can put our call here, and I'm using the get to pull from the API. You have to have your authorization, and you put your key in here, and then that interacts with the API and allows you to pull the data. So we'll go ahead and we'll run this API call. And this is from the UFC 329 that was, I believe, last week. And you can see all the data here. So I would take all of this data and I would put it into a JSON file. That JSON file is right here. And we can see that there's just way too much text for me to do anything with. So I would also then import this data into Power BI here. And we can go to my queries. So initially when I pulled, I'll just add a new source. So you would add a new source, choose JSON, and then import the data that you're looking for. And then we have the list here. So we would click on the list, and then you would convert it to table. And then you select this and you expand everything into rows. And then we would come over to, I believe it was about stats, expand to new rows. And we'd find just the round stats. There we go. And then we can see everything here. And if we come to what I was looking at specifically was the leg, head, and body shots, you could come over to this column, these columns, split it by delimiter. And then it splits it and allows it to be interpreted by the chart. So we'll just go ahead and cancel all this out. But that's how I imported my data. And then I was able to get to this screen where I could filter out the different things that I wanted. Power BI allows me to add up all the body shots and landed by the sum functions. And then if I wanted to, we could analyze the specific weight classes to see their different metrics and how it was split. And then initially, when I was trying to do this with Python, I was having an issue with getting the JSON to pull correctly. So thankfully, Postman was able to just get everything put together for me in an easier way. And that is my project. I just want to say thank you to the audience for watching this presentation, and to Professor Liang. I want you all to have a great day. Thank you.